and I know we have some different members and were here last time. So Conservatives have a deep fundamental concern with many aspects of the way the government has approached the opioid crisis. But regardless of your views on that, I think it's legitimate and something we can all agree on to ask for critical information about the contracts associated with that program. What we know about the history of the opioid crisis is that Purdue Pharma developed an opioid product which they over-promoted with lies and misinformation, and that caused the opioid crisis in the first place. And now we have Purdue Pharma and other companies that are offering dangerous drugs that the government is buying and giving away, supposedly as a solution to this problem. So Conservatives are saying that we need to get to the bottom of the relationships that exist between corporations and government, what kind of contracts exist, and how are Purdue Pharma and other companies that are making these products profiting? What is the structure of these agreements? Is there indemnification protecting these companies from legal liability? These are all questions that I think it's in the public interest for us to know. So out of this concern, Conservatives have put forward this important motion to get the contracts. I know there's been some informal discussion in between, and if there are reasonable amendments, of course, we'd be happy to see those, because the principle here is that we need to see the contracts that the government of Canada has signed with these companies. It's important for accountability and for protecting the public. We know the kinds of practices that these companies have engaged in the past, and we need to get to the bottom of what kinds of practices and relationships exist in the present. Sorry, and just before I conclude here, I wanted to note we have the letter that came in from Dr. Summers with some additional information on that, and I was hoping we might be able to invite Dr. Summers to share a bit based on his experience.
I realize it came out late. Did everyone see the letter? Maybe everyone just take a look. It came out probably 2 hours ago, just 3 hours ago, early afternoon. Somebody who wants to, I think, appear and talk about some of the issues that's professor from SFU. So take a look, and maybe it's something we can bring him here on. But go ahead, Mr. Generous.
Okay, are we able to invite him to? Just because there's
are we fine with that?
I'm sorry, I'm just not understanding under what context. For which
on
study?
This, just on this issue.
Which study?
On the motion that's before us right now.
Well, I think we should probably, I imagine that the proper order of business is for us to discuss the motion, vote on it, and if there is a study, maybe afterwards talk about the witnesses. I think we're putting the proverbial horse before the cart.
I'll just note here, maybe have a look at the letter. In the meantime, Dr. Summers has some information I think would be of interest to all members about some of the lobbying and the relationships associated with these.
Thanks. Let me just interrupt you. Maybe just take a look at the letter. It did come out about 3 hours ago.
Sure,
I can ask the clerk to resend it, but take a look over the next bit. We can maybe look at that. Go ahead, sir. Mr. Jones, go ahead.
I'll wrap up my comments there, and we can come back to these points. As I say, as a matter of accountability, accounting to Canadians, what is happening and what has happened, what is happening in the present in terms of the relationships between government and these pharmaceutical companies that are profiting through the sale to the government of these dangerous drugs. I think the public has a right to see these contracts, and hopefully we'll be able to get to a resolution on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Next, I have Mrs. Vignola. If you'd like to go ahead. But before you do, I just want to comment what a wonderful, moving SO31 you made in the House today. And I think we'd all be happy if you perhaps reiterate a tiny bit of what you said in the House today.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to answer your question. Tomorrow, the Shaved Head Challenge is taking place at Limoilou to support Jean-François Girard, who is somebody in Limoilou who is at the heart of everything that is cultural and artistic. He has a very vicious lymphatic cancer, and I didn't want to wait until tomorrow, so I shaved my head today, and I made a declaration in the House today to support Jean-François and other people who are, who have passed away due to cancer or who are affected by it. So here I am, without any hair. Of course, I am not imitating Sinead O'Connor, and you would be lucky that you will not be hearing me sing. Concerning the motion ahead of us, I have two concerns. First, yes, the word contract is in the motion. By definition, it means that we need to study it at OGGO, but it is also a public health issue that is already being covered by the Public Health Committee. Another point that is a bit of a thorn in my side is the fact that we are demanding documents from provinces across Canada while we have no right to demand anything from Canadian provinces. I think that goes against the very spirit of the letter at the constitutional level. It's an intrusion. This intrusion is not something that we should be encouraging. So those are my two concerns that I have with this motion presented today. I understand that opioids are an important source of concern, and it is a product that should have been used to alleviate pain that other products did not help with. And now it's become a public health concern. It's bringing up a lot of other problems as well. There's no clear solution. There are a few solutions that have been recommended by certain provinces, but we should not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have to really take stock of what is happening right now. Do we have to start over again? Perhaps we should take stock of very specific items and resolve this crisis that we would like to see disappear ultimately. But my two main points is that it's already being studied at the Health Committee, and I don't want to, double the work. It is a waste of public funds. Although public accounts might be very interested in this, but I also find it troublesome to order provinces to provide documents or anything else. That's interference, and so I cannot agree with the motion as it is worded currently. That's what I wanted to say on the topic. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kuzmirchuk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just wanted to, again, just to applaud the courage and the solidarity that my colleague across the table has demonstrated in the House. Just a tremendous leadership. She is very eloquent when she speaks and very eloquent even when she does not speak. And so I just wanted to say thank you once again, Madame Vignola. I agree with what Madame Vignola has said. This is a study. The opioid study belongs in the the health committee, so the Committee on Health, HESA. This committee, my colleagues across the way in the Conservative Party will be happy to find out, or happy to learn, is already studying this issue, the opioid epidemic, and it's actually titled Opioid Epidemic and Toxic Drug Crisis in Canada. This is the study that HESA is already studying, and they have already had 33 witnesses called on this issue. They have had 8 meetings. Their 9th meeting, as I understand it, will be tomorrow on this issue. And they've had 33 witnesses. They've had 18 briefs on this very issue. They are the committee that has the expertise, that has the resources to study this issue. And I would say that this issue belongs in the HESA committee, in the health committee, where it's currently being studied. This would only duplicate those efforts. And again, I truly believe that our colleagues across the way should reach out and to their colleagues in the HESA committee and work through them, because they are already studying this issue. At the same time, again, I would say that for me, my priority is to fix this issue, is to see this issue fixed. Should not be treated, the opioid crisis should not be treated, should not be used for fundraising. And this committee should not be used as a platform for fundraising and for cheap clips. This is too important of an issue, it's too serious of an issue, and people are dying, are losing their lives because of it. And so I strongly believe that this study, again, is already being undertaken at the Health Committee. That's where it belongs. That's where they have the expertise. It's where they have already done the work, the serious work, to deal with this issue. And they've brought witnesses with various viewpoints on this issue. And I do truly believe that that's where this study belongs. And the other thing that I would just add as well is we're seeing provinces grappling with this issue. We're seeing provinces of various different stripes grappling with this issue. And it's important that we work with our provincial partners, that we understand this issue, that we understand it fully, that we don't jump to conclusions. And you look at, for example, obviously British Columbia has one model that had elements of decriminalization as part of their pilot project. You had Alberta that went the completely opposite way and is also seeing tremendous increases in opioid deaths. We're seeing in Alberta, we're seeing historic number of people that are losing their life to this scourge, to this epidemic. And so I think it's important that we draw the lessons. We don't just focus on one viewpoint or just focus on one jurisdiction, but really work with our provincial counterparts that are on the front lines of this battle, work with our municipalities, and work to fix this issue. That's what I would say. And so again, the motion that is before us has a very, very tenuous link to the what is the mandate of this committee. And if we really want to study and get a handle on the opioid epidemic and the toxic drug crisis in Canada, again, the HESA committee has already done the spade work on this. They're already far ahead into their study, and I do believe that that's where this study belongs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzmirchuk. Mr. Jawari, you're next up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo my colleagues' recognition of Julie's leadership. Julie, you are a leader in the House, outside of the House, in the committee, and out there in the community. So thank you. So among the permanent members of OGGO, probably I'm in a unique position that I also am a member of the HESA committee. As so many of my colleagues have already said, in the HESA committee, we are studying the opioid crisis. You got a quick stat from my colleague MP Kuzmirchuk. The session, the next session, which is tomorrow morning, is on opioid crisis. it's a very collegial and committee. We've always recognized the need. No, we're not. So, so when we needed extra time to be able to do a study, we very openly talked about it. We've also agreed in that committee that we'll extend the women's health study. One of our colleagues who was here from that committee, Madam Goodrich, suggested an excellent two-day study, two-session studies on women breast cancer, and then we are going to the research. And I don't think there would be any issues once this motion has been referred to the HESA committee to extend the existing committee work on opioid by a few sessions to be able to go through the contracts and have that deep dive that we need to do. Also, there is precedence in that committee for us to look at contracts. We looked at Medicago. We looked at other contracts as is related to COVID. So just by the fact that it says contracts doesn't have to come to OGGO only. It can go to HESA. And I'll be brief, and rather than repeating myself, there is an ongoing study, as my colleague said. We never had an issue when a worthy study and a worthy motion has come to HESA. Look at it. I'll be supporting this motion when it goes to HESA to look at it. Just because it has to do with a contract, HESA's never had an issue looking at that aspect of a study. So I strongly suggest we forward this motion to HESA, and I'm sure with Dr. Alice's support and Madam Goodrich's support, we'll be in a position to be able to extend the study and look into do a deep dive on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ellis, welcome, OGGO.
Well, thank you, Chair. It's good to be back. J'ai déjà parlé avec ma
I've already spoken with my colleague from the bloc, and I would like to thank her once again for making this change with her hair.
That being said, sitting on HESA, certainly in my mind, as Mr. Johari knows very well, contracts are not the place for HESA. They don't belong there. They belong at OGGO. And I'll certainly start my remarks by reminding folks here of the mandate of OGGO. That pursuant to Standing Order 1083C, the committee's mandate primarily includes the study of the effectiveness of government operation, the expenditure budgets of central departments and agency, the format and content of all estimate documents, cross-departmental mandates, including programs delivered by more than one department or agency, new information and communication technologies adopted by the government, and statutory programs, tax expenditures, loan guarantees, contingency funds, and private foundations deriving the majority of their funding from the Government of Canada. The committee is specifically mandated to examine and conduct studies related to the following organization. It goes on to list a bunch of organizations. So that being said, that would be a significant departure from what we have ever done at Health Committee in the past, and certainly having looked through a multitude of documents over many years, I would suggest that that's not something that happens at Health Committee. That being said, Chair, I can't underscore the necessity for this study to be undertaken any more than to go back and look at the history of OxyContin and Purdue Pharma. Certainly in my past life, I was part of an interdisciplinary team that treated chronic pain, which we started that, I believe it was in the early 2000s. So we have been intimately aware on that team with the ravages of the use of opioids in attempting to treat chronic or persistent pain. I would also suggest that when anybody here, if you were to examine the story of Purdue and OxyContin and There's lots of interesting movies out there that may or may not be true. But that being said, we do know that the parent company, Purdue Pharma, and the Sackler family were successfully sued for $6 billion to pay for the ravages of opioid misuse. And we also know that there was significant junk science that was done to allow the continued prescribing of opioids in an inappropriate manner, even after the good science was well aware of the fact that that wasn't going to work. And we also know that there was that documents were difficult to find. I won't say hidden, but there was also much misinformation and disinformation, and that became a significant cause for concern. You know, there was a point of time in this country when the treatment of chronic or persistent pain, that part of the mantra was that more and more opioids should be given until the pain is gone, which I would suggest that anybody around the table with any common sense would be able to understand that that's unlikely to happen. So that being said, I think as we've moved forward through this and begin to understand that treatment of opioid use disorders is an incredibly difficult topic and multifaceted, I would suggest that given the sordid history of what has happened with the prescription of OxyContin in the past, and oddly enough, Dilaudid or hydromorphone is also made by Purdue Pharma. So I think that bears, people here need to bear that in mind as well. I would also suggest, Chair, that when you look at some of the testimony which my colleagues have described, which we have heard at the Health Committee, I think one physician who testified there put it very eloquently when he said that opioid use disorder is not a lack of opioids. It's not like iron deficiency where you need to get more iron and then you will be fine. You know, I would suggest that this is much more complicated than that, and that is what our mandate at the Health Committee is to study, and I would suggest that the mandate here is to begin to uncover those contracts to see if there is any nefarious intent or suspicious benefit that any actors, they being state or potentially drug company, benefited from the policies that have been put forward, including decriminalization, which would most significantly be affected. And we've seen in the experiment in British Columbia, we have seen a reversal of that particular program. And we also know that with its cousin program, I'll use that terminology, of so-called safe supply, we do know that there's been significant diversion of hydromorphone in particular, or Dilaudid as it's also known, or once again made by Purdue Pharma, that we know that that medication has been diverted. We also know and have concern about the potential nefarious intent of not calling for the precursor ban of chemicals to make fentanyl in this country. So I hope that allows committee members here at OGGO to understand what our mandate at Health Committee is, what we have been studying, and what we have uncovered thus far, but to realize that this is a departure of what would have historically been studied at Health Committee, and it is certainly well within the mandate of government operations to adopt this well thought out motion in front of committee and to bring witnesses to study that. And with that, Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc Ellis. Mrs. Goodrich, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's lovely to be back here at the glorious OGGO. Yes, so I am a regular member of the Health Committee, and so I have had an opportunity to sit through the multitude of meetings that we have had looking at the opioid epidemic. But what we have here in the motion from my colleague Garnet Jennis is actually substantially different than what we've been studying at the Health Committee. This is about looking at the contracts and trying to get to the bottom of where the money came from. And this is precisely why I believe that it is critical that we have it at OGGO rather than at the Health Committee, because this is about looking at this. And I understand a few hours ago that the chair and everyone on this committee did receive a letter from a doctor, and his name is Dr. Julian Summers, and he's a distinguished professor who has been quite vocal when it comes to addiction medicine. And in his letter, he talks about the fact that he is a clinician and researcher in the field of addiction, and he has led a number of different federally funded initiatives specifically designed to reduce addictions and related harms. And so when he saw that our motion was on record at the OGGO committee, he took it upon himself to write in to ask to present. And earlier this week, he actually was part of he did a podcast. And in the podcast, he was talking at one point during the podcast about some of the very concerning pieces that were coming out of British Columbia, specifically related to some of the top public health officers that were the ones that were making decisions as to whether we would have, whether they would go forward with so-called safe supply in British Columbia, that created companies that then stood to profit and are providing safe supply in British Columbia. And so effectively the very same doctors that were making the policy decisions as to whether they should or shouldn't go forward with a particular policy were in turn had companies involved to do this. And so I really do think it is critical upon us that we not only go forward with this study from my colleague, but have Dr. Summers come testify to committee to give a little bit more breadth of the allegations he made in the podcast from earlier this week. So I guess I'm going to see if perhaps we could have some conversation about first having a vote on the notice of motion from MP Janice to get to the bottom of it, look at the contracts. This truly is the best committee when it comes to looking at the specifics and the dollars and cents of it, because we do know that this is government money that has gone towards these programs. We do know, and perhaps Liberal members can raise their eyebrows and everything else, but we do know that the program that was called Safe Supply is effectively governments that have decided to give prescription hydromorphone and Dilaudid. Specifically, in many cases, it is Dilaudid, which is the Purdue brand name of hydromorphone, which is a synthetic opiate that is the equivalent to being stronger than heroin, to people that are struggling with addiction, and that is all paid for by taxpayers. And we need to know who's paying, how much is being paid, and who is getting rich off of this. Because at the end of the day, if someone is in fact profiting off of this, that is absolutely an issue. And if it's not happening, there shouldn't be any fear from any member around this table about getting to the bottom of this. So with that, I would hope that we can get to a vote.
Thank you. Mr. Genwis, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I've listened to some of the debate, and I have a simple amendment to propose, which will hopefully resolve some of the concerns. And I had sent it to the clerk a few minutes ago. So the one change is in Part B, replace order with respectfully ask, because I think there had been some feedback on that around just provincial governments. And so that's the one proposed change as part of the amendment. And then to add a Part C that says share the documents referred to in A and B with HESA in the event that HESA finds these documents useful. This is a document production request. It's not a study request. So I don't think there's a great need to have a lengthy back and forth about should this be at this committee or should this be at that committee. This is simply a request for documents. So how about we get the documents? We have the documents. We also share them with HESA. That way we have the documents and HESA has the documents. I agree with my colleagues about the proper mandate of this committee around contracts. At a minimum, based on that, we can agree that it's good for us to have them. Now, it might members of the health committee find these documents interesting as well, sure. So let's, I think, hopefully adding that section in to say, let's request the documents. Let's not make the process needlessly bureaucratic by referring it to another committee to then request the documents who could then share it back to us. Let's get it done here. But yeah, let's share the documents with the other committee. So the amendment is to change order to respectfully ask in part B, and to add in C, share the documents, refer
Point
to
of
A and
order.
B with HESA.
Point of order, Chair.
Classified documents as well. So I'm suggesting that
Point
one
of
of my
order,
colleagues
Chair.
might want to move this amendment. Maybe if Ms. Goodrich. So yes, that's what I meant to say, Chair. I meant to say that I was describing
I think
an
I still wanna
idea for an
stress this.
amendment that someone else might move.
Yeah. Mr. D'Souza, go ahead in your point of order.
I think
Mr.
if
Taylor,
I understood
or
the
Mr.
amendment that
Bachrach
he's
is-
now
Please
asking
let me
for us-
finish, sir. Sorry. Yourself in the point of order, then we're going to Mr. Bachrach on the speaking list. Go ahead, Mr. Souza, please.
Yeah, I think the amendment really should be read to move this to a HESA. I think is really what the amendment should be.
It's not a point of order, but appreciate that. Bachrach, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is speaks to a really difficult issue that's taken a lot of lives in the area I represent. And I think it's one that needs to be handled with the sensitivity that it deserves in recognition of the deep pain and anguish that has been caused for people right across the country. Dr. Ellis referred to this as a difficult topic and multifaceted, and yet in much of the debate in the House, many of the messages that we've heard, I don't think that what we've heard in the House has really measured up to that test of a difficult topic that's multifaceted. This has become politicized in a way that I think does a great injustice to the families that have been affected by it. And so I'm going to be very careful with my words in trying to deal with this motion before us. It seems like there are some suggestions that there's some sort of impropriety related to contracts. And if that's the case, then absolutely that's something that OGGO should look into. If we're talking about federal contracts, the purview of this committee, and there's some kind of impropriety, as we've seen in other cases that we've dealt with, then absolutely I would support getting to the bottom of that. But it's a little bit unclear what the scope of this line of inquiry is or what the purpose of the inquiry is. Ms. Goodrich said earlier that she wants to get to the bottom of where the money came from. My understanding is the provinces purchase these products for use in the programs, and they purchase them themselves. So are there federal contracts that are going to show that the federal government is purchasing these opioids? It hasn't. There's been very little information. And so if we restrict the scope of the inquiry to federal government contracts and memoranda and agreements, then that's something I can get on board with. And I think this is where my colleague, Mr. Genuis, was going at. And so I would move an amendment that we simply delete all of the words after any safe supply program, so that the motion would read that the committee, in relation to the opioid epidemic and toxic drug crisis in Canada, order the production of all contracts, agreements, or memoranda of understanding to which the Government of Canada is a party, signed since January 1st, 2016, concerning the purchase, acquisition, or transfer of Dilaudid or any generic form of hydromorphone for use in any safe, and I would add the letter R, safer supply program, because that's how they're referred to in British Columbia, and end it there. And the reason for this is that I do think that when we get into the amounts, dosage, and frequency of delivery, we're really talking about the health dimensions of this issue and not the contractual dimensions, and that really does belong more appropriately at HESA. So I will move that amendment that we delete all the words after "in any safe supply program," and I'm happy to hear the contributions from my colleagues. Thank you.
Sorry, point of order, Chair. I assume that the member intends to leave in the words "provided that these documents shall be deposited with the clerk of the committee in an unredacted form and in both official languages within 3 weeks of the adoption of this order." Can I assume that you just meant to remove the portion up to the word hydromorphone?
If you wouldn't mind just clarifying for the clerk just exactly what it is you're or deleting, please.
My apologies, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Mr. Genuis. So it is to delete the words after "in any safe supply program" and before "provided that these documents," if that's clear enough. That was indeed my intent.
Okay, thanks. I have, I'll start on the amendment. I have Mr. Kuzmirchuk, then Mrs. Vignola.
And I appreciate what my colleague, I really actually appreciated his introductory remarks, because I think it really set the context of this conversation. It's a complex issue. Many different provinces and communities that are trying many different approaches are struggling to get their wrap their heads around this issue, get a hold of this issue, and I think there's a complexity to this that we have to understand. And so I really appreciated just him putting this into the broader context. I did want to ask him whether he would consider at the start of his amendment to include that this motion would be referred to the Standing Committee on Health, because again, it's my strong feeling that, again, the tremendous work that's already been done in that committee on this issue provides that context, provides that.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. We
Sure.
can't, if that sub-amendment's out of order, we can't put in our motion to refer to someone else.
Well, I'm just speaking to my colleague, and I'm just asking, like I said, if that's something that he would consider. Okay. Sure. Something that we could do in the subsequent, we return back to the original motion. But that's what I wanted just to put out there. My thinking is that, again, like I said, as we did with Medicago, because that committee has done all the spade work and the hard work of generating the witnesses, the testimony, they have the full picture of this. It makes sense that they look at the contracts through the eyes of that expertise, making the connections to the testimony that they had already heard. And they would have the sensitivity to be able to actually look at this issue and new information, and actually, as my colleague had stated, do it justice. So what I wanted to put out there is I'd be interested in seeing a motion put forward, again, supporting what Mr. Bachrach has said in amending the motion, removing the reference to the provinces, because that is the purview of the provinces, but at the same time, moving this within the broader study of the opioid crisis in HESA committee.
Thanks. We'll go to Mrs. Vignola, please, and then Ms. Khalid.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. I'm a very visual person. Therefore, I need to see the amendment and the sub-amendment in written format if possible, please. That will allow me to understand all of the terms and the implications of those terms, please.
No sub-amendment. It's just Mr. Bachrach's amendment. The clerk is just updating it, and we'll send it to you.
Merci.
The amendment from Mr. Bachrach was deleting a line or two.
Okay.
But that will go out. While we're doing that, Ms. Khalid.
Chair, actually, my point was also just to seek some clarification. The way that Mr. Bachrach read his motion, I was under the impression that B is to be deleted. I'm not sure if that is the case, or we're just leaving it at what the language of A is and just ending it there, or are we keeping? Okay, that's.
Since we're just waiting for
go
the
ahead, please.
translation.
And it'll come out to you shortly from the clerk. But yeah, go ahead, Mr. Bachrach.
So the amendment is to remove the words after in any safe supply program. Do you see that in A?
Mm-hmm.
Between that and provided that these documents, and to remove clause B altogether.
Remove clause B. That's
Yes,
what I was.
correct.
That's what I was asking.
So that the entire motion would read: order the production of all contracts, agreements, or memoranda of understanding to which the Government of Canada is a party, signed since January 1st, 2016, concerning the purchase, acquisition, or transfer of dilaudid or any generic form of hydromorphone for use in any safe supply program, provided these documents shall be deposited with the clerk of the committee in any unredacted form and in both official languages within 3 weeks of the adoption of this order.
And that's the entirety of it.
C'est ça.
This
People?
is
Thank you. That
Very clear.
clarifies it for me. Oh, actually, one more clarification. Thank you, Chair. Just wondering about the date, January 1st of 2016. Is there a specific reasoning for that date? Sorry, I'm very, very brand new at this committee. I'm just wondering if there's any reasoning behind that date, or is it one of those arbitrary ones, or, 10 years, 8 years, is there a significance to that is all I'm asking.
we can get back to it when that's.
Date.
Mrs. Vignola was next, and then we'll pop over to you, Mrs. Goodrich. You can address that. Mrs. Vignola?
Ce sera très rapide.
I'll be very quick. If we remove section B entirely, that would be something that I would be interested in. The provinces must remain autonomous. I'd just like to ask some clarification as well, or provide some clarification. Yes, when we use government, the word contract, yes, it's government operations. However, it's untrue that other committees don't study contracts. Medicago was studied at the HESA committee, and that's where everything was revealed. If those committees don't feel like they are that they can study the committees, then it is up to us to do it. But industry, health, those committees will study contracts. That is not governmental operations unique prerogative to study contracts. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to get through all of our work.
Point well made. Mrs. Goodrich, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there was a question from Ms. Khalid regarding the selection of that date. And the date is roughly aligned with when the conversations happened surrounding Canada's first so-called safe supply program in London, Ontario, that began in 2016. So this would just allow us to be encompassing of those historical datas. And it's worth noting, so back a while ago, Dr. Ellis put forward an order paper question, and in the order paper question, we got a whole bunch of data back on SUOP, which is the substance use funding agreements. And so in some parts of it, it literally lists out that the project title is Safer Supply, and then in the activity it does say service delivery. And so it leads to believe that there would in fact be federal government contracts for this. And so it's just one of those situations where we've tried to do through OPQs, we've tried to get to the space, and considering this is a space where this is taxpayer dollars going towards these substances, I do think it is incumbent on us to just make sure that we're looking through this. And while I appreciate the conversation that contracts can be looked at in all different committees, and that is very true, but contracts regarding government money do fall under the purview of OGGO. And so as to not continue having these conversations, I would have preferred to have seen B stay in with a space respectfully asking provinces and territories to provide us with these contracts. But I do understand the concerns that have been raised regarding provincial jurisdiction. So I just hope that we can support this to get these documents and really just see where the contracts lie.
Perfect. The amendment as presented by Mr. Backrack has gone out to everyone's P9. But it is, as mentioned, deleting B entirely and deleting starting where it says together with any related documents, et cetera, ending with hydromorphone to be used. So if we do not have, Mr. Backrack, and then Mr. Genuous and Mr. Ellis.
I found Ms. Khalid's question about the date an interesting one. It's not something that I considered, but 2016. I'm curious what the rationale is, because I think if we want to really get to the bottom of this, we should probably go back to the date of the earliest federal agreement or contract that relates in some way to safer supply. I don't have that date offhand, but I think that would be the most reasonable and logical approach for the motion to take. Oh, sorry, maybe I missed it. Sorry, Ms. Goodrich.
Yeah.
Did
That's
you
what I said.
explain that earlier?
Effectively, sorry, Chair, if I may.
Well, I have Mr. Genuous and Mr. Ellis, but if they want to skip their
Text
spots and
Scarlett
you can
and he can
address
tell
it,
me.
and then we can go back to them.
Effectively, thank you, Mr. Chair. Effectively, Canada's first so-called safer supply program was funded or came to be in London, Ontario in 2016, and so this would encompass those potential contracts, which is precisely why that date was picked.
Thank you. And sorry if I missed that.
No worries.
I have Mr. Genuous, Mr. Ellis, then Ms. Khalid.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, we can keep talking about this issue. Certainly, it's an important issue, but I think we're probably zeroing in on a consensus, and maybe we can just agree to it and be done with it. So, although it's not ideal from our perspective, happy to accept the amendment, recognizing that I can count as well as anyone. And I would just suggest to address the issues around the committee that we add the line that I had informally proposed, share the documents referred to with HESA in the event that HESA finds these documents useful. So I think if we agree to adopt the amendment, add that change, and adopt the motion, then we're done. So I don't know if people want to proceed in that fashion or not.
It would require a standalone amendment. Not.
No, I know it can't be done by some amendment. I just committees can operate formally or informally if
You
there's
wish
agreement.
to, if the parties wish to suspend for a few minutes to maybe chat
No,
this out.
I think we have agreement already.
Well, I don't know. You've just proposed an amendment for him to suggest.
That's fine. Let's vote on Mr. Backrack's amendment. Then I'll.
Well, I have
We don't need to suspend.
Khalid
Let's get our work done.
next then. Yeah. No, I have yourself and then Mr. Backrack.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I agree with the rationale that we've been discussing on the date. I mean, if we're really wanting to delve deep into this issue, then perhaps going back 10 years, which is a more reasonable time, would be a little bit more logical. Contracts, especially in government, and we've seen all of us are seasoned members of government and politicians. We know how slowly or how methodically things progress, and so to me it doesn't really fly that on the year that it was decided that safer centers were going to be opened, whether it was in London or anywhere else in the country. What about the time before that? And I think that it would perhaps be a decent evaluation to see what the past has looked like, and I think a decade would perhaps be a reasonable time. But I understand, Chair, that I cannot move a sub amendment, but I did just want to get that on the record, and perhaps after the discussion on this amendment, we can perhaps entertain another amendment on the date specifically. But thank you for listening and entertaining me today.
Point of order, Chair. I think you'd find unanimous consent to change 2016 to 1867. To be as comprehensive as you want, because there were no safe supply programs before 2016, so it doesn't matter.
We're not talking about. We're talking about
Sorry, Mr.
contracts that would link
1750.
to it.
Colleagues,
I'll give you
please.
1492.
Mr. Genuous, please, thanks. Mr. Backrack, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. The one change that I mentioned when making the amendment verbally that didn't show up in the version that was sent by email is just to add an R after the word safe. So it would read Safer Supply Program. I don't think we probably need a new version emailed, but I would hate for the discrepancy of one letter to allow the federal government to not provide certain contracts or memoranda because they use the phrase Safer Supply Program. I think that's the more commonly used phrase, certainly in British Columbia. And so I would just hope that the committee would allow the amendment to stand as I presented it verbally. And then the other piece, just speaking to Mr. Genuous's comment or suggestion around providing the documents to HESA. I'm not an expert in procedure, but I assume that when the documents are provided to us, they're also available to other committees. I do note that we have several members of the HESA committee who have been participating in today's meeting. And so I would ask if there's any reason that HESA would not be able to take those documents up for their own use in the study. I expect that they're going to have greater utility to HESA. And so I would welcome it as a separate amendment if that's not the case. But my understanding is that if they're made available, that they could be shared with other committees.
Yeah, my understanding, if they're made available to us, they are the property, so to speak, of OGGO would require an agreement from us to send it over. Where we run into a problem if something is provided to us is confidential or if it's along those lines, it makes it difficult.
Okay.
So
Well,
it's
as I
not
said,
as easy as it
thanks for the
sounds, unfortunately, because
clarification.
we're going through this with ArriveCAN documents and public accounts back and forth. So, as Ms. Khalid would know, yes, it's not as simple as it sounds. It should be, unfortunately.
Fair enough. Well, maybe we can consider that separately as an amendment then.
I think we're all in agreement with the SAFER, and I'm sure if this goes through, it will be communicated to the government that it's not to the identical wording. If they use safe or safest.
If I may, Mr. Chair, if I can still have the floor, I do think that when the documents come back, the concerns that certain members have with these programs, I don't believe is with the contracts. It's with the actual approach, the health approach that the programs take. And therefore, it's going to be better considered by HESA, and we're going to end up back where some of my colleagues proposed we go at the beginning, which is that HESA should take it up. What I don't want to see is a study at OGGO about the merits of safer supply as a health approach. I think that belongs at the Health Committee. If there's some sort of impropriety involving federal contracts, absolutely, let's take it up. But I haven't seen any evidence of that thus far. And the products for these programs are being purchased from companies that produce the products. So, to the earlier comments about profiting, it's a commercial transaction just like the purchase of any other pharmaceuticals from companies that produce pharmaceuticals. Some of these companies are pretty objectionable, fair enough, but we haven't seen any, evidence of impropriety along the lines that's been alluded to. So I'll leave it at that and look forward to the vote.
On Mr. Backrack's
yes,
amendment?
Just a quick point of order, actually. Just wanted to remind my colleague across the table that when we're speaking to the microphone, just to protect the translators, not to pound the table, and also to maintain a distance with the microphone. So the last intervention, I would say that he did both of those things. And again, just to respect the health and safety of our wonderful translators, I just wanted to remind him to please be more respectful.
I'm not sure if we're allowed to pound the tables. I think with the closeness to the microphone, it's just watching the loudness of your voice and consistent distance. But your point is taken. Colleagues, I will get back to you on that issue, but
Maltese people talk.
Okay. Gentlemen and ladies, are we fine with Mr. Backrack's amendment with the words, we all agree that it would be the word safer. Are we comfortable with that amendment?
Yes.
Agreed? Perfect. Now back to the amended motion. Ms. Goodridge, then Mr. Generous.
Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would like to make a few amendments. Amendment number 1 is add B, share the documents referred in A with HESA in the event that HESA finds these documents useful, if that is possible. And if not, one other amendment I would like to have is where it says we've amended it to say safer supply. My recommendation would be to have safe supply, comma, safer supply, comma, prescribed alternatives, comma, because those are the 3 terms that are used in depending on the province to refer to these programs. So it's safer supply, comma, safe supply, comma, prescribed alternatives programs. It's just more encompassing, and it's just to really clarify it, because for instance, in London, Ontario, where the London Intercommunity Health, which has Canada's first safe supply program, they call it safe supply. I know in British Columbia, many of them call it safer supply due to moves made by the British Columbia NDP government to change and not to adopt effectively a marketing term that makes children think that they are safe. And so I do think that that's a piece, and I do know that some of the newest conversation is some governments are calling it prescribed alternatives, and so that is my rationale in that. And so, Mr. Chair, I hope that adding B to allow us to share the contracts with HESA is in order, and I appreciate that you might have to discuss this with the clerk. But perhaps we could suspend for a couple minutes so you can figure out if that is in fact in order or not.
Sure. Let me just address that. There's 2 issues that you've brought forward: the safer, and that, which is, I think, is pretty agreeable. The issue of pre-agreeing to share if something comes to us that is considered confidential or this and that, then we run into a problem of us sharing it. And we ran into that with our ArriveCan stuff, as Ms. Khalid knows. I understand what you're getting at, and some colleagues have commented it, but I think it'd be cleaner if we left that part out. But I will leave that up to the will of the committee. We can certainly do it once the documents arrive to consider or to pass them over, but that might be cart ahead of the horse. Mr. Backrack, on the amendment proposed.
I support the spirit of the amendment. Adding those other terms is in line and consistent with the rationale that I made for changing it to safer. However, the sharing with HESA, it feels a little bit problematic, because if I recall the wording of the amendment, it indicates that we would only share them in the event that HESA found them interesting or useful. And I would propose that we drop that part and simply share them with HESA, because I think otherwise we're asking HESA if something is useful before they've seen it, and just to simplify. But otherwise, I support the spirit.
Oh, that's a valid point. Mrs. Vignola, on the amendment?
Right, on the amendment. I'll let my colleagues put on their earpieces. Here's my question. I agree that we should be, sharing, and I think that we're working in silos a bit too much, and I think it's really horrible how many conditions we have to and hoops we have to jump through just so that we can talk to one another. But my question is the following: why is it? And I don't know if there's an answer to this, but why is it that HESA did not ask for the contracts? Because they can. So that's the part of the amendment. I mean, it's not like we're imposing one of our decisions on HESA. I agree with sharing, but I don't want to impose. I don't have a question to my own, or rather an answer to my own question, of course.
Yeah. I have Mr. Genuis, then Ms. Khalid, and then, sorry, Mr. Souza?
I thought Mr. Bacharach's suggestion was a fair one, but we're speaking as if we're speaking about an amendment, not a sub-amendment. I don't know if he formally moved that as a sub-amendment. If not,
He won't let us have sub-amendments.
You can move sub-amendments.
He's mean that way. Yeah.
But you can't have sub-amendments that are unrelated to the touch a different section, but you can sub-amend the section that's proposed to be amended.
We've got Mr. Bacharach's amendment.
We're on Ms. Goodrich's amendment.
Or Ms. Goodrich's amendment. There was, if you're referring to your previous one or the other previous one, was not in order. What is your question about exactly?
You can't sub a sub. You can't amend your own motion.
I'm not asking you to tell me the Green Book. What are you asking for, Mr. Jones?
I would love to.
What do you want?
What do you do here? What do you do here? No, I wanted Mr. Bacharach proposed taking off the sort of rationale part at the end of the additional clause, new clause B. So now it would simply read that the documents be shared with HESA, period. So that is a sub-amendment that
I'm sure we can all come to an understanding that what's proposed is the new wording, softer, and that we share it with HESA.
Agreed.
With HESA. Keeping in mind when the documents do show up, we cannot impose conditions on HESA. For example, here's the documents, but you have to keep them confidential. So we cannot impose on the other committee.
Agreed and so ordered.
Yeah. So if we are fine with that, Mr. Bacharach? Mr. Bacharach? We're fine with, I think we're all understanding that as proposed, it will be the wording that Ms. Goodrich provided, and then that we will share the documents with HESA. Mr. Kuzmirchuk, do we need a few moments separate? Why don't we suspend for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll come back